and welcome to our online class about time. Now, interesting place to start maybe, but I want to start by talking to you about my struggles with time. You may or may not be like this. You may fall on the one side of the spectrum or the other on time, but many of us fall on the one side or the other. We might be tend to be more lazy. Might tend to be more workaholic, and somewhere on that spectrum or on that line is where you fall, the complete lazy end or the complete workaholic end. I will tell you this, that as self-confessionary here before we begin this class, I would probably tend to fall on the workaholic side. Laziness is not something that people have typically accused me of. Typically, I work really, really hard, fill up my days with a lot of work, fill up my time with a lot of work. And so we're probably looking at 15 years ago now, I went through a struggle and a season in my life where work was pretty all-consuming. We were planting a church in the Cincinnati, Ohio area at the time, and I was working 2 day jobs plus planting the church, plus leading and pastoring and teaching and doing the best that I could. We had 2 young children at the time. We were just in a place where I was kind of burned out, tired, frustrated, exhausted. I can remember kind of having one of those days where, I'd worked my early morning job at the cafe. I'd done some landscaping for a friend in the afternoon, and then I was on my way to do an evening event at the church. And I was home for a very short amount of time for dinner. And I remember telling my wife, I'm not doing anything well. I don't feel like I'm a good dad. I don't feel like I'm a good pastor. I don't feel like I'm a good employee. I'm just worn out. I'm worn out. I'm worn out by the situation. I'm worn out by the time that I'm putting in. I don't feel like I'm making any progress. It doesn't seem to matter how hard I work or how much that I do. Progress isn't being made in our family. Progress isn't being made in our church. Progress isn't being made in our community. And I was worn out, burned out, tired. I remember kind of having just one of those really emotional days where I actually sat down before I got in my car for that evening event. I sat down in my driveway and just went, nothing is going the way that I had planned it, and here I was, 15 years ago, I was in my late 20s, I was almost 30, and here I was, and not living the life that I thought I should be leading, not being the dad that I thought I should be, not being the husband that I wanted to be, not being the person at work that I wanted to be in any of my jobs. And so I was frustrated, I was tired, I was pretty burned out, and something had to give. And so Corey and I had this really, really deep and in-depth conversation about, of all things, time, right? About what do we have time to do? What do we have, and you're going to learn this word, margin. When I say margin, think about it this way. Here's a business card that somebody recently gave me that did some painting for us. The margin is the white space in and around the lettering and the logos and the things that are on there. This is my notes for this talk today. The margin is this white space next to my list of things that I need to do. I didn't have white space. There was no margin in my life for me to accomplish the things that God had called me to be. The dad that He called me to be, the husband that He called me to be, the employee and the employer that He'd called me to be. I wasn't being any of those things. And you know what? It hurts your relationships. It hurts your friendships. It hurts the way you interact with God. And I didn't have margin. I didn't have time and space to be creative, to think through things, to give time to my spouse. There just wasn't margin. And so I was struggling. Because, like I said, we all fall on one end of the spectrum, the lazy end of the spectrum or the workaholic end of the spectrum, and I leaned towards the workaholic end of the spectrum. And I did not know, I probably could tell you, at that season of my life 15 years ago, I'm not sure I even knew how to be lazy. I'm not even sure I knew how to take a day off. And I remember having this kind of really deep conversation with my wife and going, you know what? This is a really important, I think, pivotal time for us. I actually, because I had such a breakdown in emotion and thought processes that day, it gave enough space of crisis in my life to go, something has to give. Something has to change in the way we're doing things. And I remember I went into to my employer. Now, one of the places that I worked was closed on Sundays, but of course on Sundays I was planting a church, so I was preaching on Sundays. And so we talked to the employer, and I said, I can't work Saturdays anymore. I just can't work Saturdays anymore. And I remember having the conversation with my boss and him going, "Don't you and Corey need the money?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do need the money." Well, it didn't compute with them. Don't you need to take care of your family? And I did. I needed to take care of my family. But I needed to take care of myself first. We love our neighbors, love our family, love our spouse, love our church, love our friends and family. We love the people around us as we love ourselves. And I was not loving myself well. I was not loving myself well. And I got to tell you that time management is one of the ways you have to love yourself well. And I did. I stopped working on Saturdays at my secondary jobs so that I would be fresh for Sundays. I started to preach better. I started to be a better employee. I started to be a better husband just because I had that one day of work off. I had one day off. I had one day where sometimes all I was doing, in fact, very at the beginning, a lot of times all I was doing was sleeping, getting an extra hour of sleep. Sleeping in past 6 o'clock in the morning, sleeping in past, at that time I was getting up about 5, but sleeping in past my normal time. And it gave margin to my life that I didn't even realize I needed until crisis hit. So what's my motivation for doing this class with you? Let me take a sip of coffee here. It's going to be a conversation, all right? My motivation of this class with you is that I don't want you to ever get to the point that I was at, where you're burned out, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're not feeling like you're doing anything well. I don't ever want you to get to the place where my family was at in that moment. That's some of my motivation. The second motivation is I taught our internship classes for my former church for years. And one of the things that they always had me come in and teach, even when I was not, I ran the internship program for a while, but even before I was the head of the internship program, is I taught a class on time management, on how to work through this struggle of calendar that we all seem to have. And so my motivation is that I've enjoyed teaching about this because I know what it looks like when we don't have our calendar under control. And then the third motivation is my staff here and some of my leaders here, some of the people in my church here said, "Adam, you need to teach us more on this." I did a message called Busy in January of 2020, and when I did that message, everybody's like, "You need to teach us more on this." So that's why we're doing this class. That's my motivation for doing it, is that, sorry, I feel like I have a little bit of something in my eye. Not a big deal. But that's my motivation for doing this class, is that, I know what it looks like when your calendar gets out of control. That I've been trying to teach and encourage leaders for years now on how they cannot get to that point. And then third and foremost is there's kind of an inspiration from my team here that has said, "Adam, this is something that we think you should get out there and teach more on." So that's why I'm doing this class on calendaring, on time management, on getting your calendar under control. I mean, there are so many ways you can talk about this. And I gotta tell you, there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of people that have done talks on this before. But what I wanted to do was give you some wisdom of mine from experience, give you some of the things that I do now, give you some of the things that I learned from some of my mentors, so that you can get it under control. Now, before we get into all of that, you've heard some of my struggles. You heard some of my motivation. Those things are important, but I want you to know this, is that I think since this is a class that our church is putting out, I don't want you just to hear some practical things, of which there will be a lot of practical at the end of this. So you're looking for the practical. Don't skip ahead, because you need to know what the foundation of that practical is for your life. And a lot of the foundation of the practical for me came through this thing right here, through my study of my scriptures. That, you know what, time is a valuable and important part of the things that God has taught us throughout all of Scripture. In fact, guys, listen to this. It's all throughout the Bible. Time is. Time management is. In fact, check it out. Genesis 1:1. The very first chapter of our Bibles, God talks about taking chaos and making it order. Maybe you don't understand this, but just some biblical background. When you hear the word seas or the deep or waters, what you're hearing is the Bible's understanding of chaos. And it would have been an understanding that the sea would be chaos, that the depth of the ocean would be chaos. And you got this moment in here where it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and it was void. It was in chaos. It didn't have anything to bring structure together. And it says, darkness was over the face of the waters, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So you got this moment before creation begins where God is there and His Spirit is there and hovering over what is chaotic. And the first thing that God begins to do is to order time. It is. It's the very first thing He does. Let there be light, and there was light, and God saw the light was good, and He separated light from darkness, and called one day, called one night, and there was evening, there was morning, the first day. The first day of creation, God creates time. He creates this idea of what happens in for us, a 24-hour period, right? When is the sun up? When is the sun down? There is a measured moment of day and night, of beginning and end to the turn of the earth, right? We know that there is this period that becomes a day, and then the next day He creates something else, and then He calls that another revolution of time, another 24-hour period, another day. And He does this thing in Genesis which is so important, that He goes through and he creates everything, and He creates the calendar for us, doesn't He? He sets up the week, and for 6 days He creates. For 6 days God works. For 6 days God uses time to do His work. And then the heavens and the earth were finished, and the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished the work He'd done, and He rested on that day from all the work that He had done. So He blessed the seventh day, and He made it holy, because He rested from it, from all the work that He had done in creation. So here you see, from the beginning of creation, this is such a mind-blowing concept. If you've never thought about this in relation to the Scripture, it's a mind-blowing concept to think that God not just create days and create a week, but then He creates that there's a pattern of work, rest. You work for 6 days and then you rest. God creates that pattern from the very dawn of creation. He's saying, out of the chaos, the thing that I want to do is create an ordered set of time and week, revolutions of the earth, and I want to create an ordered space for rest. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? That God created work times and rest times. Flip over to Deuteronomy. And I just picked one chapter in Deuteronomy, because Deuteronomy is filled with festival days, rest years. In 15, it says, at the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release. And it's the release of creditors and things like that. And he kind of blesses every 7th year as a year of rest. And actually does this whole thing where it's like, at the end of 7 years, 7 sevens of years, at the end of 49 years, there's a whole year of what's called Jubilee, which is a whole year of rest. And then He creates a celebration things in chapter 16, the celebration of Passover, the celebration of the Feast of Weeks, the celebration of the Feast of Booths. And He celebrates all these festival times, these rest times, these calendar out times. In fact, we do similar things, don't we, in our calendar, where there are supposed to be scheduled days of rest, whether it's the 4th of July or Labor Day or Thanksgiving week or Christmas week. We create these things. In fact, this is a time-honored tradition in our Old Testament language. This is the things that God set up in His law. It wasn't just about eating certain foods and not touching certain things and not doing certain things in God's law, but there's also in all of God's law, especially you see this in Deuteronomy and in parts of Exodus, where God actually sets up, these are festival days. These are days where I expect you not to be working, but to be bringing everybody, no matter their class in the community, together for a time of rest and celebration. So God actually calendars out holidays for us. He calendars out rest times for us. Here's another one, just another Old Testament passage. Maybe you've never realized this. So, do you guys know the 10 Commandments? They're in Exodus chapter 20. They're very familiar to us. In fact, if I did like a chat thing with you as you watch this, you'd probably all know, well, we shouldn't kill people, we shouldn't murder people, we shouldn't steal our neighbor's stuff, that kind of thing. We shouldn't commit adultery. Those are common ones that have been adopted into most of our lives as moral code. But the first couple is about not making gods, not having no gods before God Himself. And He's saying, set me up as the standard of worship in your life. And then commandment, which is I think is number 4, is this. Remember the Sabbath day. Remember your day of rest and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the 7th day, it's for me. It's a rest unto the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, not your sons, not your daughters, not your male and female employees, not your, even it says your livestock, not even your dog works on this day. Not even the person who is visiting within your gates. Not even the company who's come over is supposed to work on your Sabbath day. For 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea. He's going back to that creation story we read a little bit ago. And all is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath, and he made that 7th day holy. That's Exodus chapter 20, where the 10 commandments are found. Now, this is so important, because I don't think anybody would argue with, you shall not murder. You shall not steal your neighbor's BMW. You shall not commit adultery with your neighbor's husband or wife, right? We would probably all agree that those are good rules to follow in our lives. But that 4th commandment of there's got to be a day where you just worship and rest seems like a crazy idea for us. See, the act of time is it's molded into creation. It's molded into God's law, and it's even molded into our New Testament realities. Here's a couple of chapters, just for those of you who are like, man, Adam, it's all Old Testament stuff. Well, creation was before the law was even invented, so it's really just in the fabric of the way God designed the world to work. But a couple of things from the New Testament that maybe will help you. 1 Corinthians 16, concerning the collection for the saints, concerning the offerings that you take, I directed the churches in Galatia, you are to do this too. On the first day of every week, each of you should put aside something and store it up that he may prosper, and there'll be no collecting when I have to come. He's like, work every other day of the week, because on the first day you're bringing in your tithes and offerings. That's when you're getting together for worship. On the first day of the week, you're getting together for worship. So work all those other 6 days so you can collect the offerings and the tithes on the first day of the week. Maybe this one's another good one. Acts chapter 3, we see Peter and John observing regular times of prayer. There's a regular time for certain things to happen in their calendar. Peter and John were going up to the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. It's Acts chapter 3. And there they heal the blind man the man was lame from birth. It's this incredible story. But the point was, they had a time set aside, the 9th hour of the day. They had time set aside for prayer. What I want to submit to you guys for this entire class session, online community experience that we have together is that God really cares about time. God cares about your schedule. He cares about your calendar. He cares about the way that you order your life. In fact, I would say it is one of the most top priorities that every follower of Jesus should have, but honestly, every person on the planet. If you can harness the power of your calendar, harness the power of time management in your life, it's going to free you up. It's going to relax you. It's going to energize you. It's going to give you margin. Remember we talked about that when I talked about this a little bit ago. It's going to give you white space to be more creative. It's going to change the way that you live your life. I cannot begin to describe to you the impact the calendaring and time management can have on your life. So let's recap a little bit. What do we learn in session 1? That everybody's got struggles with time. We either fall on one end of the spectrum to laziness or to workaholic, and we need to learn to harness the power of our calendar. 2, that don't get to a place where you're struggling so bad that you feel like you're doing nothing well in your life. And I believe that the harnessing the power of your calendar and your time management will change your life in such a way that your struggles can be undone. And then 3rd, I'm motivated because I've seen the fruit of this in my own life and in the lives of those that I've had the privilege of leading over many, many years. And so I want you to be able to encounter this biblical truth that time is God's way to remove chaos from your life, is to manage things in time. And that rest is a major part of that time management piece. And if we can understand that the calendar is God's idea, it will revolutionize the way that we intersect with the world around us. And it's going to revolutionize the way we do life together. So friends, I hope this has inspired you. I hope that these next couple of sessions will be practical for you, and that you'll grow into your time management. But we got to have a foundation that we understand this is God's idea. This is God's idea for us to harness our calendar, to harness our time, to harness our rest, so that we are the people that God designed for you and for I to be. All right, I'll see you guys back next time. We're going to look at what I call the power of a word in your calendaring life. All right, see you next time. Bye.